Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy, and this is this week's Team Kentucky Update. This has been a long, hard week for so many of our families who are cleaning up from storms or tornadoes. But one thing I'm reminded of this week is the strength and the positivity of Kentuckians, the kindness and compassion we show to each other. I saw this again yesterday as I visited Prospect in Jefferson and Oldham counties, and then was in Jessamine County to see the storm's impact and to meet local officials and families that have been impacted. I got the chance to thank many of our first responders. We're so grateful for them and our transportation and utility workers for their incredible work over the last 48 or so hours. Just like we've said it every time, we will get through this. We'll get through it together, and we are now through the emergency phase of this set of storms. Over the course of the week, I declared a state of emergency and implemented price gouging laws to protect families from overpriced goods as they recover from the storm. I've spoken with so many emergency response and local officials, and we've been working to keep Kentuckians updated. So today, I want to give another update on where we stand in our response efforts. I typically view responding to these types of events in three different ways that mainly apply to the very largest ones. But there is the emergent phase that occurs right afterwards. And that's when people are searching through buildings, making sure people are okay. We know as of today that we had one fatality, but we continue to confirm that there are no other significant injuries. There's no one unaccounted for. Thankfully, everyone other than that one young man has been found and located and is okay. And that is a real blessing, given what we've been through. Tragic for that one fatality, but this is one that could have taken a lot more lives. I credit so many different groups, from local officials to our news media, especially our meteorologists and weather crews, for getting the word out there, and finally for Kentuckians being so weather aware. Remember, we cannot get numb because we have a weather event, it seems like, every couple of months. We've got to take every single one seriously. We let our employees out early that day in between the two rounds of storms. So many other employers did too. I think that, plus admittedly, a lot of people being gone for spring break, ended up both impacting us in positive ways and preventing more loss of life. As of this morning, the National Weather Service has confirmed 11 tornadoes touched down in the state on Tuesday. A second confirmed tornado touched down in Boyd County, in addition to two tornadoes confirmed in a new tornado, each confirmed in Clark and McCracken counties. So that means we've had two confirmed in Boyd, one in Clark, one in McCracken, one in Mason, Anderson, Bourbon, Henry, Jessamine, Jefferson, and Nelson counties. All the twisters have been categorized as EF1s, except the second confirmed tornado for Boyd County, which is believed to be an EF2. Straight line wind damage was confirmed in Fayette, Mercer, Spencer, and Woodford counties. And surveys are also planned today in Woodford and Fayette counties, which could ultimately result in confirmations of additional tornadoes. Power outages are down to 3,575. That's incredible. Right, that's down from 32,700 plus on Tuesday. Given the severity of this week's storms, our state roads are mainly in good shape. And that's because of a lot of hard work from so many folks from the Transportation Cabinet, Department of Forestry, National Guard, but a whole lot of this is done by local first responders and others, and we are grateful. Rolling roadblocks started yesterday on two interstates to support power restoration efforts. Here is a shot of a rolling roadblock yesterday on I-75 in Fayette County. You know, it's necessary to do these to get the power lines back up. These are major power lines going over interstates. Remember, we had two major power lines down, one on 75 close to mile marker 104, I believe, and the other was in Carter County on I-64. We want to thank in and out-of-state drivers for their patience as utility workers work hard to repair power line damage and restore power to Kentuckians. Transportation cabinet crews in most of the state have resumed normal operations. Some cleanup activities are underway in portions of central Kentucky to move storm debris along the shoulders. I want to point out some of the remaining blocked roads in the state. Three I'm going to highlight. In Oldham County, a portion of KY 393 is still closed for utility repairs. We think that's going to be open very soon. In Barron County, part of KY 3179 Oil Well Road was washed away during Tuesday's storms. Crews are planning repairs, but it's going to be closed for some time. A slide is currently blocking US 25 in Rockcastle County, and crews are moving vegetation and clearing debris. Should you see a dark traffic signal, treat the intersection like a four-way stop. Don't just continue through it. Stop at flashing red signals. Use caution if lights are flashing yellow. As a reminder, if you have damage to your home, the first thing you should do is call your insurance company. Those with questions about how to proceed with their insurance company after a disaster can find resources online at insurance.ky.gov, or you can call us at the Department of Insurance. That's 502 564 3630. 502 564 3630. Right now, we have started the process with counties, starting the federal individual assistance and public assistance damage assessment. I actually talked to the FEMA administrator both on Tuesday and then this morning to give them updates. What we will need is for everyone to take photographs before they clean up. These are both individual homeowners and renters, anyone who's had damage, as well as on the public side, our roads and county and city buildings that might have been impacted. This one is going to be a little different than others about whether we reach the threshold for public assistance or individual assistance because it is so widespread. When you look at Jessamine County, and while it was primarily just that commercial area that's hit, there's a significant amount of damage in a very small area. We've seen that in a couple of subdivisions in Prospect as well. And so this is one where we're going to have really good record keeping and have a whole lot of people submit, because if we meet the thresholds, it's going to be out of 30 plus counties. So we'll try to give updates as that comes in. It's going to take a lot of work, but we'll do the best we can to give people the best information as we have it. Right now, don't have totals for structures impacted. Now, there's really they label when you go through an area that's been hit 1 through 5. 1 is no damage and 5 is totaled. We don't have as many on the 5. As in some other weather incidents, but we have a whole lot on the 4 and the 3 especially. So I want to remind Kentuckians again that it was them being weather aware, along with having so much information out there pushed by so many about these storms approaching, that helped us have a good response. The other thing that's helped us have a good response is the flexibility to spend the dollars that are needed after a natural disaster or an emergency. We were able to do that after the tornadoes in the west, the floods in the east, after the tornado in Trimble County and Carroll County, and the wind damage in Gallatin County. We were able to do that after this one as well. But again, the current pending state budget, for the very first time in our history, would limit the amount an executive branch can spend or expend in response to a natural disaster, and not a limitation after any individual one, but over the course of a year. To give you an example, we would have exceeded the cap that they are setting in the first 3 to 4 months of this fiscal year. In just 3 to 4 months, we'd be out of money that we're allowed to spend to respond to a natural disaster. Now, some say that there's another pot that's sitting out there we can use. No. That under the budget can only go towards FEMA matches. FEMA matches can be a year, 2, or 3 years later. You can't use them for the immediate emergency response. And that means we've now had at least 2 major weather events. Again, the tornadoes in Trimble and Carroll County and the damage in Gallatin County, as well as this storm that's impacted so many counties that we would have been over the amount, and it would have taken either a special session or calling people back in the veto period for us to simply respond. And think about how long that takes and how long a bill takes to pass. Those are precious moments minutes, hours, and days where we have to be responding immediately. All I'm asking is that we be able to do our job for people in their time of greatest need. And talking to all of our emergency first responders, they're aware of this limitation and they all think it's a bad idea because they need to be able to do their work and not worry about if the bill's going to be paid. We need to be able to open our state parks and not worry that we're going to have to charge people. We need to be there like we were for the people of Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky, like we were for Trumbull and Carroll and Gallatin counties. And in a limitation on our ability to do that is not good policy. Just think about it, not just in terms of the $25 million limit for a whole year of responding to disasters, given what we faced, but there's a separate limit of $4 million to fight wildfires. I mean, surely we are not going to stop fighting wildfires. Now, this is a bad policy. If the legislature wants to be a part of responding to a natural disaster, first, that's challenging. There's so many of them, and you've got to respond so quickly. But certainly there are other ways to do it other than to hamstring an administration. So my hope is when they come back, they will hear these pleas. They will listen to their county emergency management because people are not going to be happy if this goes into effect, if the limit is hit, and then they have to wait for the General Assembly to go to Frankfurt and to pass a bill to get the help they need, probably days, weeks, or months after they needed it. So again, in the most challenging times, we need to be there for our neighbors. Let's make sure we have the policy in place that allows us to do that. All right, I'm going to take just a pause because we're going to move from the weather update to some other topics. All right, now we'll move to how we normally start these Team Kentucky updates, and that is with our red hot economy. Since the beginning of this administration, we've now announced well over 1,000 private sector and new location and expansion projects here in Kentucky, over $30.5 billion invested in us, over 52,500 new jobs. And last week, after the Team Kentucky update, we got confirmation of one more. SCS2 LLC, a member of the Southern Coil Solutions family, has made a new cutting-edge $63 million distribution and transfer facility in Kentucky. The project follows a July 2023 announcement of a $27 million investment to build a fully automated steel coil warehouse distribution and logistics center, also in Bowling Green. That announcement created 30 full-time jobs. I'm thrilled to see the continued investment by Southern Coil Solutions. This latest investment builds on our strong infrastructure to support distribution and logistics, and I look forward to this facility being open next year. All right, since we're having a Team Kentucky update today, and as the legislature takes its veto break, I wanted to provide Kentuckians on a couple bills I've signed, one that I've vetoed, and a couple more that will be vetoed today. So let's start with there'll ultimately be 13 bills and resolutions that I've already signed. There'll be more coming today. But first, we have Senate Bill 14, which I signed on Friday. This bill makes changes to the Kentucky Board of Cosmetology and changes the process for violations. Next, I signed Senate Bill 18. This bill standardizes the rules and specifications for school bus equipment. I signed Senate Bill 46, which loosens the restrictions on tinting for windshields. I also signed Senate Bill 125, which expands the ability of local governments to start off-highway vehicle pilot programs. I signed Senate Bill 145. The bill allows more healthcare facilities to have access to child abuse registries when doing background checks on new employees. That keeps our kids safe. I signed Senate Bill 158, which allows financial institutions to open a restricted account for a minor for court settlements or claims proceeds. I signed Senate Bill 162, which allows our law enforcement to access and retain copies of accident reports. I signed Senate Bill 164. It makes it easier for our people to gain their electrician or plumbing licenses through proprietary schools or career centers. I signed Senate Bill 174 that strengthens the restrictions on gas companies when it comes to protecting phone and internet lines. We've seen the challenge when especially cell phones go down. That's one of the most important tools for communicating, especially right after a weather event or a natural disaster. I signed Senate Bill 194, which allows employer health plan information to be delivered digitally. I signed Senate Bill 229, a cleanup bill for the Blockchain Technology Working Group and the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority Board. I signed Senate Bill 29. The bill makes the process more efficient for Kentuckians when they go to a glass repair shop for their car. And the last piece of legislation I signed Friday, though I signed one today, was House Joint Resolution 56. That resolution, actually, I believe I signed that this morning. That resolution allows $71 million from the last budget in capital construction funds to be released for improvements in our Kentucky state parks. One of the biggest challenges in the last budget was that they held the money for necessary repairs. We gave exhaustive list after list after list of what we needed done. They finally went ahead and passed that resolution, which will free up money for repairs and upgrades to pools, playgrounds, golf courses, guest rooms, and ADA improvements throughout our state park system. This year is Kentucky State Park's 100th anniversary and our 100th anniversary celebration. The park system houses Kentucky's most beautiful and breathtaking sites. It boosts tourism, provides jobs for our people, and it's a safe place for Kentuckians when the worst of the worst hits, as it's opened its doors after tornadoes and floods. So it's important that we preserve our parks, which requires that we have the dollars to repair them when needed. This is a good step forward for investing in what's truly a gem for the state of Kentucky. All right, on Friday, I also vetoed House Bill 581. And I vetoed that because it interferes with what are local government decisions on local matters. What that bill said is that you couldn't zone something locally just for EV charging stations. You had to allow gas stations if you were doing that too. Well, first, that should be any community's decision, not legislators who don't live and work in that community. But the second thing that they're not seeing is I've had businesses approach us about charging stations believing they bring people and can bring tourists. Now, those tourist sites, many of which are operated by counties, or some of them are even private employers that rely on people coming in and buying tickets and doing other things, don't want a gas station, but they do think that an EV charging station can bring more people to their locality and increase tourism dollars. So I vetoed House Bill 581. Let's not do zoning through the General Assembly. Let's trust our local communities to do what they think is best. Okay, today, as it relates to nuclear energy, I signed one resolution and I vetoed one bill, and I want to make sure I go through the explanation. I believe in an all of the above energy policy that includes nuclear energy. And that's why I signed Senate Joint Resolution 140, which directs the Public Service Commission to make staffing and administrative preparations to be ready for nuclear, to process applications for siting and construction. Now, the legislature will be getting a letter because no appropriation was made for it. Right? This is a whole new job that you want the Public Service Commission to do, but you haven't funded it. And the law is pretty clear. It goes back a couple of decades in that if the General Assembly creates a program but doesn't fund it, they don't expect you to do it during the biennium. We've got a couple of new programs that are created, but intentionally not funded yet. And look at different things that aren't funded in the budgets that have existed in the past. So it could be 2 years that you're not going to fund certain tax incentives that are on the books. It could be certain years where you're not going to fund specific programs that are otherwise on the books. So we will be providing a letter with a list of new laws that have gone into effect, but no funding has been provided for them. Remember, tax amnesty was passed, I think, 2 years ago, and they wanted us to go out and get a private vendor, but there was no funding. And so we went through the process. We put out an RFP and said, will anyone do it for free? And they said no. And it was going to cost us about $2 million to do internally, which we did not have at the Department of Revenue in their budget. And so we couldn't do it. That's the same with any of these new programs that are passed but not funded. But again, I signed this because we have to be open to all forms of energy, and that includes nuclear energy. But now I have vetoed Senate Bill 198, and that attempts to establish the Kentucky Nuclear Energy Development Authority. I'm not opposed to having a development authority. However, this board isn't appointed or really overseen by myself or any other constitutional officer. There are 22 members on this board and 8 non-voting members. None of the 15 at-large members are appointed by either me as a governor or any constitutional officer. They're selected by the private sector. This is supposed to be an executive branch agency. The legislature can't just say, you in this position in the private sector and you in that position on a private sector association are automatically on a board and then giving governing authority. That's not the way the executive branch works, not the way that the power can be delegated to carry out the law. Also, legislators are appointed to the board, and the Supreme Court's ruled over and over and over that you can't do that, right? It's a separation of powers issue. The legislature is supposed to create the policy. The executive branch is supposed to carry it out. So you can't appoint a legislator to an executive branch board or agency. So again, we've worked well with Senator Carroll on a number of things. He pushed really hard to get things we needed for DJJ into the budget that didn't end up in the final budget. This is not any opposition to nuclear energy or a development authority, but a development authority has to be created legally. And if it's going to be an executive branch agency, it can't be made up of directly selected private sector individuals through legislation. Also today, I will be issuing a veto on Senate Bill 65. Senate Bill 65 is unnecessary, unconstitutional, and what I consider stunt legislation. That's when it doesn't actually accomplish something. What it does is it attempts to void emergency regulations on the expansion of vision, dental, and hearing benefits under Medicaid that are no longer in effect. And the sponsor admitted that. We have regular regulations that are now in effect. The regular regulations aren't impacted by the bill. So the bill attempts to void emergency regs that have already been voided by the issuance of the regular regs. I don't believe we ought to be passing legislation when we admit that it doesn't do anything. The other thing that it tries to do is void administrative regulation for the Board of Social Work. Regulations and the ultimate word on them are an executive branch function that ultimately falls with the governor. That piece is also unconstitutional. But let me just say again that the expansion of Medicaid to these things was such a good thing. So much so that the legislature on one side tried to increase the reimbursement on the dental side. So since I put that e-reg in place and then now the regular regulations, from January through November of 2023, more than 460,000 Kentuckians used and benefited from those expanded services. I think when I signed them, I said it was pretty simple, and I still believe it is, that if you want somebody to go to work, they need a pair of glasses to see well enough to drive to work. And if you want them to be safe at work, they may need a hearing aid to hear the instructions or warnings to be safe at work. Today, I am also vetoing House Bill 804. 804 is yet another attempt for the legislature to control the venue that different constitutional or legislative challenges are filed in courts. What it attempts to do is take the decision of venue entirely out of the judicial branch and give it to any one of the litigating parties that can just simply ask for a change of venue without any process or evaluation. That violates the separation of powers. It is squarely in the judicial branch's authority to handle things like venue. The Supreme Court's already struck down several laws on this. I don't think we should keep going back and back and back and passing different versions of unconstitutional laws. All right, switching gears, we are in the middle of National Public Health Week. And let me tell you, the incredible heart and resilience that our public health professionals have shown over the years is truly remarkable. What I love about Kentucky's healthcare community is that when somebody needs help, they help. And it doesn't matter how or why they ended up there. It's just love and not judgment. With the challenges Team Kentucky has faced over the years, our public health professionals have repeatedly made selfless decisions and shown up to help others. Folks, all of us have a hand in creating a stronger and healthier Kentucky. And what a better way to demonstrate that and spotlight our public health team, who provides services from newborn screenings and nutrition education to administering vaccines, medication programs, and so much more. Public health helps all Kentuckians live healthier lives. One service I want to highlight is a Kentucky Prescription Assistance Program, which helps qualifying individuals access free or reduced cost medications. Last year, over $68.5 million worth of prescription drug support was provided through this program. That's $65.8 million less than our people had to pay. That's $68.5 million that didn't come down to a decision about whether to buy food or medicine. Since 2008, when the program started, the total value of assistance through the program has now exceeded $1 billion. Eligibility is based on income guidelines set by participating companies. Call 1-800-633-8100 to see if you qualify. And next up, the thing that we can't stop talking about, the upcoming solar eclipse. We're just days away. It's on Monday. We shared some ways last week you can make sure that it is safe and memorable. With hundreds of thousands expected to visit our state, remember the tips. 1, come early. 2, be prepared. 3, drive smart. 4, stay late. You want to make sure that you see this once in a lifetime event. For some, twice in a lifetime event, but that you do it safely. And finally, our Team Kentucky All-Stars is everybody out there who is keeping people safe during these storms and is helping with the cleanup right now. Everyone from our first responders to the utility workers who are working as fast as we have ever seen them do so. Everybody out there that's collecting data to help us hopefully qualify for public or individual assistance. All our local leaders, everyone who's just helping out a neighbor, thank you. We get through these, we get through them together. While we don't want to go through these types of events every single time, Kentuckians have stepped up and shown that we are special people. And for that, I'm grateful. All right, now we will open it up to questions. We've got a number of journalists here with us and one on the line. We'll start with Tom Latek.
Thank you, Governor. What is the threshold now for FEMA for individual and for public assistance?
Yeah, let me get you those numbers on the threshold for public and individual assistance. And remember, it is aggregate. And so it's something that we have to hit as a state to get. We're still waiting for data on the public side. Now, we had some roads washed out. We certainly had utility damage. What I haven't had a report of is major offices, buildings, school bus yards and barns. We haven't seen or had that reported to us yet. So that's what I'm waiting on to get a gauge on the public side. On a storm like this, I think it's questionable on that side. The individual assistance side, if we hit it, it's because of how widespread that it is. And this would be the first one since I've been governor. If we do hit the individual assistance threshold, it is a truly statewide event that gets us there.
I had a follow-up, but that's okay.
That's all right. Ask it.
No, go ahead.
Okay, Sarah. I won't turn that down.
First, the Safer Kentucky Act.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you have any indication whether you support that or not, and since you can't line item veto it, are there any provisions that you can live with or not? And my second question is about the truancy bill that requires court intervention after 15 days of missing school. Do you support that or not? And if not, what alternative solutions do you see to contact these people?
Yeah, still reviewing the truancy bill. It is a major problem. The question is jail or a DJJ facility the right answer for it? I think it's a complex problem that existed long before the pandemic, probably exacerbated by it. Still reviewing that one. Also still reviewing what they call the Safer Kentucky Act. There are some pieces in it that are really good pieces of legislation. The part that would allow for the destruction of a weapon used in a murder is something that is pretty close to me, with the 1-year anniversary of the Old National shooting coming up on April 10th. Thankfully, the ATF seized that weapon and it was destroyed. Otherwise, I was going to have to watch a weapon that murdered my friend be auctioned to the highest bidder. I also believe that we do need a carjacking statute because of the level of violence that's typically used in carjacking, and it will give us reliable data moving forward about it. I have great concerns that it could criminalize homelessness, and those that may need mental health services instead face potential jail time. So reviewing it, I certainly wish I had a line item on that one. And I also wish that legislation like this would be broken into different parts and pieces, because what you saw on the debate was people grabbing just one part of it and saying, how could you not be against it, and ignoring everything else in it that didn't have anything to do. I mean, I'll just give you the destroying a weapon that's been used in a murder has nothing to do with a response to homelessness. It just doesn't. And there's a big difference when you respond to homelessness if you're responding to a violent incident or just a person who is without that home. And I also worry that the legislation treats an abandoned car better than one that has a person sleeping in it. So we'll have more information on that soon. Carolina.
Governor, the $25 million yearly limit that's in the current budget proposal. What does the situation look like when Kentucky hits that limit and a natural disaster hits? What happens?
That's a great question. And for anybody listening, the question is, what happens when we hit that $25 million limit that the General Assembly is trying to put in for the first time? It's never happened before because there's never been the limit. I tried to give an example the other day about the tornadoes in Carroll and Trumbull and the damage in Gallatin. We were able to open up General Butler State Park, bring people in, and not charge them for that one night or 2 nights that they stayed because their home was either damaged, the power was out, they didn't have water. I mean, that's the humane way we ought to be able to take care of our people. We were already over the limit. And so then you look at, what is it that we could do? If we got creative, would we run their credit card and say, we hope the General Assembly passes a bill when I can get them back in that will cover this? Or otherwise we'll send you a bill? That's a really tough thing if you've just walked in from that. I mean, I remember talking to families in our state parks after the floods, and all they had were the clothes on their back. They wouldn't have had a credit card to run. What do I do with the National Guard? Knowing that there are going to be costs there that ought to be reimbursed, or if we need other help to come in. It presents questions we've never had to answer, but it certainly creates impediments to the type of emergency response that we need. And I saw the other day that Senate President again said there was another pool of money. That's to match FEMA, and that happens later. But in many ways, that one's bigger. If they'd flipped the two, I could probably live with it. You know, one's 75 million and the other is 25 million. We've never come close to 75 million, I don't think, on the FEMA match piece that's been there, but we've certainly hit the other number. But if they are going to set a limit, then it's got to be higher, because I think each of the last 3 fiscal years we would have exceeded it. And so why set a threshold so low that you know you're not going to be able to meet it, and you risk not being able to respond to the natural disaster in the way that you should and that you need to? And they happen more often. They just do. Now, last budget, I think it was, I tried to create an emergency response fund so that it would be separate from the budget reserve trust fund where we take it from. And I think we had recommended $200 or $300 million. I'd have to go back and look. And obviously, if we don't have that many natural disasters, that lapses back, right? It needs to be replenished, but it would come back. And that was attempting to just have positive budgeting practices for it. But $25 million just won't do it. Liam.
Governor, I wanted to ask again about House Bill 509, the open records bill. It hasn't gone through the Senate yet. This question's a little bit of a two-parter. First off, would you, if hypothetically speaking, if the Senate passes the bill and sends it to your desk, would you sign the current version of it as it stands? And second, do you consider, just broadly speaking, do you consider messages sent by public officials about public business on private devices to be public record?
So I have not received that bill yet. We'll review it when it gets to me. It's gone through some changes, but let me start by saying I've done as much analysis and legal analysis on open records as just about anybody out there, serving as Attorney General, ultimately approving the different opinions that we had. As Attorney General, I was the only constitutional officer to release his tax returns every single year. And then the Lieutenant Governor joined me, but I've been the only one now for 8+ years. And that's something the press used to jump on everybody about as necessary transparency. We have a log on where the state plane goes. I believe in transparency. But what I can have is a different analysis of parts of this bill that I believe will allow us as the government to pull records that are requested when otherwise someone who wants to get around the open records request, they'll never come to light. So this all comes out of Fish and Wildlife. And Fish and Wildlife has a lot of problems, and this is one. Fish and Wildlife hadn't issued state email addresses to their commissioners. And they insisted on texting each other on their own devices. That's wrong. So right now, what the law says is if you do that, that is an open record. But all we can do in terms of enforcement is ask that person, would you please look through your phone and take snapshots of anything that we're asking for and send them to us? Now, do you think a bad actor who's trying to get around the open records request is going to do that and send them to you? But if this law goes into effect and it mandates that they have that email address and it mandates that they use it and it finds a violation if you don't, because it still finds a violation if you don't use that state mandated email, then we are able, not the individual trying to get around the Open Records Act, to go in and to pull those emails and then to provide them. What it does is take whether you get a record away from a potential bad actor and put it with the agency that can secure those records. I've seen violations in the past where the previous administration just told you there weren't emails when they could pull them and see that there were. So I'm under the current law, then I believe, yes, if you are conducting state business through non-state means, then it's an open record because you're not mandated to do it on state emails or state devices. So again, I get that other people that I've agreed with in the past view this bill in one way. I view this part of it as us being able to secure more records when an open records request is made. Now, I've also seen somebody say, well, the governor has an analysis, but these people have already fully analyzed it and we're going to rely on their analysis. Well, one of those lawyers was also in redistricting and wasn't given that amount of deference. So again, there are a lot of ways to look at the bills that's going through. I believe that we are going to be able to pull more records, at least in the agencies that we oversee, than possibly you see today. Rebecca Grapevine.
Yes, separation or balance of powers is a big theme here. So
It's both.
Yes, two questions there. On SB 198, assuming the legislature comes back and overrides your veto, do you think there's potential legal action that you could or would pursue surrounding the constitution of the Energy Development Authority?
Oh, the Nuclear Authority.
Yeah.
Well, challenges can come in different ways. And the Supreme Court has actually said to me in one of the cases that if you believe something is unconstitutional, don't do it. And then whoever is supposed to be in that law file suit. That's not what we thought. Remember, I tried to come and say, if there's a problem, we ought to be able to file a declaratory judgment action and let the courts decide before there's a problem. They've now said the opposite. But think about anybody that they're regulating, right? That doesn't end up getting the decision they want. They can challenge the authority of the board. Think about the CFPB as it was created in the federal government. trying to make it almost wholly independent. That was challenged by individuals that they were trying to take enforcement actions on, and it was declared unconstitutional for maybe not identical reasons, but those challenges can come from a lot of places. I think I said it before. We ultimately need a new binding Supreme Court decision that rebalances that separation of powers. We all know that we intended to create 3 equal branches of government where we all stay in our lanes, and we're supposed to be able to check in different ways the authority of each branch. A lot of the Supreme Court decisions we have right now were because the governor was so powerful leading up from the 70s and the early 80s that in many ways they called legislation a rubber stamp, and that's wrong. But what I think we have seen is a move too far in the other direction. For instance, if the legislature can take any authority from the governor and give it to any other constitutional officer at any time and for any reason, then they control the executive branch. And that's not what's intended under the separation of powers. And so I don't know how it needs to get to the Supreme Court, but I think we ultimately need just a new common sense decision that's specific enough to where we can avoid a lot of these very similar lawsuits in the future that all seem about power.
Can I ask you one
Sure.
question on the same thing? Which would be SB 299, the horse racing commission becoming a corporation bill. What are your thoughts on that vis-a-vis separation of powers?
Well, analyzing it doesn't impact appointment powers, which the nuclear authority does, but an independent corporation being able to take regulatory action and punish different groups, trainers, et cetera, raises the CFPB question that I had mentioned earlier. The Supreme Court declared that unconstitutional because there wasn't an actual executive branch officer over it. And so how are you independent but have full regulatory and enforcement authority? I think that's the thing to work through there. We've never seen it before. We don't know of another group that acts that way. So a little complex legally. All right. And then we've got Sylvia Goodman on the line for Kentucky Public Radio.
Hello. Just a quick question about a former weather disaster, actually. I'm curious, what's the status of the request for a presidential disaster declaration for the Milton County tornado last month? Do we have an update status on that?
We don't expect there to be a presidential disaster declaration there. We have asked for individual assistance. We've asked for public assistance. We hope that'll be granted, but in other situations where sadly there's a lot of damage, but it's in one concentrated place, it's really hard to get. Think about Nicholas County when they had that flooding, what, about 3 years ago? That was really intense, took entire homes on their main street, knocked them over, condemned them. Weren't able to get one there, but we made the request and it's pending. And when we get a response, we'll let you know. We're doing everything we can in every way with the state, including, I believe, some travel trailers. I'll get you a number on that for the folks that are there. In the end, we want to be able to respond for our neighbors and help them, whether we get a presidential declaration or not. All right. Thank you all very much. We'll let you know about next week. I didn't think I'd be here this week, but when tornadoes like this hit, it's my job to be here. Everybody remember, life's short. Our job is to do good things and to be kind to each other. Thanks. He just had his first start in varsity and I missed it today.